With the US Women's Open taking place this month now on BBC World News as part of the BBC's Women's Season of Sport, Sarah Mulkerrins travels to the US to examine the history of women's involvement in golf. Driving change, golf's battle for equality.
We get a lot of threat letters on my life. A couple times they tried to run me off the highway as I was driving. I really did feel that my life was in danger.
Growing up, golf was not for us.
You look like you don't play golf. What is the look of golf?
As far as they were concerned, we were trash, so that's all we deserved.
Golf. For many a hobby, for some a career, but not so long ago, if you were black or a woman, it wasn't even an option. In the USA until 1961, the Professional Golfers Association had a Caucasian-only clause. Until then, black players had to play in their own events. For women, their first Players' Association was set up in 1950. Yet it was only in 2014 that one of the oldest clubs in the world, the Royal and Ancient, voted to admit female members. So how far has the sport come in embracing race and gender diversity? William J. Powell, or Bill as he was known, was born the grandson of slaves in Alabama in 1916. He moved to Ohio as a teenager and played golf at his school and college. In 1946, he returned from serving in the US Air Force during the Second World War, but he was banned from the all-white public courses in the area. With the world of golf all but close to William Powell, he had his own vision, a course open to all. In the 1940s, this was an old dairy farm. He spent 2 years working at night as a security guard. By day, he hand-seeded this course. In 1948, it opened. William Powell was a pioneer, and he was watched on by his daughter, Renee.
My first memories of hitting golf balls were standing with my dad, hitting with a little club that I have when I was probably about 4 years old maybe, and just hitting golf balls and trying to hit them down to where the creek was, the water. This is a picture of my mom and dad.
Which hole is that on?
This was number 3 green, and number 3 comes down here. And we're actually standing on the first tee, and behind us is number 3 green.
And your mother played golf as well, didn't she?
Oh, my mom did. My dad got all of us involved with the game. And my mom used to talk and tease because she would say when I was a little girl, I just wanted to run out and play. And she'd say, no, go back in, go back in, go back in the house. And then I just continued to play the game. The LPGA really had not started until 1950. And I actually joined the tour in 1967. At that time, there were a lot of tensions in our country. Sometimes we would go into restaurants and they would serve everybody but me. And actually, my roommate on tour, Sandra Post, who is a Canadian pro, and a few years ago, she said, Renz, I used to wonder why we would go into restaurants and they wouldn't serve everybody else but us. And I said, Sandra, I didn't want to tell you it was because you were Canadian. I didn't want you to feel bad. But, things like that. I mean, things like, I remember calling home and crying the first time I got a threat letter in my life and telling my parents, and I thought they would tell me to come home, and they didn't. And I thought, wow, well, evidently they don't think that somebody's going to jump out from behind a tree and shoot me.
Is that what the letters were saying?
Oh, no, they would just say, dear N, if you know what's good for you, you better get out of here, and things like that. But I remember going to our tournament director and showing him the letters, and he just said, well, there's nothing we can do about it. And I thought, these people are going to kill me, and there's nothing that they can do about it. Because I really thought that something would happen. And it didn't. Kathy Whitworth, who was one of the great Hall of Famer and a great player, and we were in Caldwell, Idaho. I had walked into the hotel and they had lost my reservation, and Kathy said to the people behind the register and said, we all stay or we all walk. Those individuals knew me before I joined the tour, and everybody was I had no problems with players on tour. It was the outside.
She was there in the heart of racism and discrimination. And you see, that kind of thing had just become institutionalized in this country because even the country set up laws against us.
I had some inkling of probably the challenges that she would have had, but you never got a hint of that from her. She never talked about it until you fully sat down and had a real heart-to-heart discussion. It wasn't something that she would ever show that was part of her history or even her father's history.
I admired her spirit, that she was able to stay out there, because I'm aware of the cruelty that she experienced.
I thought about so many people that had come before me, and I've always felt very strongly that we all stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. And, you know, there were people that just did so much to allow give others freedom.
Helen Webb Harris was one of those who paved the way. A school teacher and wife of a doctor, she was tired of staying at home while her husband played golf. So Helen, along with 12 friends, founded the Wake Robin Ladies in 1937, the first African-American women's golf club in the USA.
The only place they could play was at a 3-hole golf course down at the Washington Monument. And they were taunted by white teenagers, threw rocks at them. And of course, you know, they were called names and all kinds of things. But they persisted.
The battle began here in Washington, D.C. 80 years ago. This was a rubbish dump, full of broken glass, rusty tins and old tires. The ladies of Wake Robin were campaigning for the desegregation of public golf courses, but in 1938 they were given this.
They were collecting trash on this course, and even when they built the course, they had to play over glass bottles and cans, and it's not so bad to me that it was put on a trash dump. They should have tried to take away the trash. But you see, as far as they were concerned, we were trash, so that's all we deserved.
It was a dump, but they embraced that dump, and they were going to make that dump their own. And they came out here with much pride and conviction to make this work for them.
After Langston, the Wake Robin ladies continued to push for the opening of all courses in Washington, D.C. And in 1941, the district confirmed they would do so. Their battle for equality didn't end just there. They were also part of the movement to force the PGA to drop its whites-only rule, which it did in 1961.
Knowing where it started, all of the historical individuals who have come through this course, and I think I probably have ridden by Langston many times before becoming a member of Wake Robin and not fully knowing all of the history of Langston.
My name is Elizabeth Rice McNeil, and I've been in clubs 67 years. I came to Washington, D.C. from Pennsylvania. I lived with my auntie and took me to church. And the church I went to was Sarah Smith's church. And Sarah Smith was a golfer, one of the charter members of Wake Robin Golf Club. We went to her house to a meeting, and she had this great big old piano with these huge trophies on top of it. And I was fascinated by that. So we got a bunch of young girls together, and we formed a little club. They called us Robinettes. And we had about 18 young girls who started out playing golf. I've never heard of golf before, and I got hooked on it.
Elizabeth Rice McNeil is a unique individual all of her own.
So how many times were you champion here?
13 times. Been third champion for Wake Wyoming Golf Club 13 times.
And is it right you've got 6 hole-in-ones in your career?
I've had 6 holes-in-one in my golfing career.
That's phenomenal.
It is. It is.
We don't have any weak women in this club. We've had good principled women, good leaders that have kept this club going all these years.
8 decades after that first meeting, inclusion and support are still at the heart of their mission. The Helen Webb Harris Scholarship honours the memory of their founder by supporting young women dreaming of turning professional.
As a girl, if there's a young female trying to play, it's very difficult because there aren't that many, especially African Americans. It just tears me apart, you know, that there really aren't any. And I just don't know what happened between the time of Renee Powell and all the way to Mariah Stackhouse and Ginger Howard. You know, you have to keep on pursuing forward even when it gets tough, and that's what I'm trying to do as hard as I can. And through these ladies, they've just helped me so much.
Get ready for a sensational season of women's sport on BBC World News and BBC.com. The best footballers in Europe go head-to-head in the Netherlands at the Women's Euros.
It's an exciting time to be part of women's football right now.
In June and July, the elite of women's cricket battle it out in England for the ICC World Cup.
You're just there to do a job and try and win games of cricket for your country.
The greatest women's rugby players head for a bruising showdown in August as Ireland hosts the Rugby World Cup. Major championships across the United States and Europe will reveal who's the leading light in women's golf. And we'll have all the latest from the women's world of tennis, boxing, athletics and more. Find out all the stories behind the players and the tournaments with our special reports and documentaries. The women's season of sport here on BBC World News and BBC.com.
In 1962, tennis great Althea Gibson became the first African-American woman to compete on the LPGA Tour. Renee Powell followed in 1967. It took another 28 years for the next black player to arrive, with Larry Sugg in 1995. Since then, Shasta Avery Hart, Cheyenne Woods, Sedina Parks, Ginger Howard, and most recently Mariah Stackhouse have all made it. 8 African-American women in 67 years.
There are situations where you just genuinely feel uncomfortable and you feel that you maybe need to get yourself out of that situation. People staring at you, wondering whether you work there, not actually golfing in the tournament, or asking where you're from. I'll get the occasional, "Are you Tiger Woods' niece?" And it's not that they don't mean to be discriminating or rude or anything, but sometimes people will think, oh, just because you're African American, yeah. But thankfully, I'm in a generation now where it's not too horrible as to what Renee had to go through all those years ago.
It's making strides. I believe that it has a long way to go because, you know, I still on a regular basis, I go into a store and I have a golf outfit on. And, you know, you meet people that say, oh, you know, I thought, I didn't know, like, you know, a lot of minorities play golf, and things like that. Like, you look like you don't play golf. And I will, well, what is the look of golf? And you're right, it's, you know, it's a Caucasian, male Caucasian dominated sport. And I think that right now it's getting better, you know, with just inclusion. I think that's the big thing, just inclusion and having access to the game. And not only just getting started, but continuing to have the opportunity to go on ahead and, hey, you know what, I want to do this professionally. You know, and if it works out, great, and if it doesn't, hey, I want to work in the golf industry. And so I think it's getting better. It's just slow progress, but it is progress.
Get in, get in.
Playing out here with a course that has so much history and being with Renee, it's so inspiring to me every time that I see her, and then I see the others that have, you know, Cheyenne Woods, Sedina Parks, Mariah Stackhouse, and Shasta Avery Hart. It's great to be around them because, you know, they're first off, they're great people. They have great characters, and we all have something in common. You know, being the next one to make it on tour.
In 2015, Renee Powell was again making history. After the breakthrough vote to allow female members into the RNA, Renee was one of the first women to be invited.
To me, it's the highest honor one can ever get. You know, the old course and the RNA and where golf began right there. And to be one of the first 7 women that was selected from around the entire world was absolutely amazing. And to me, too, it was like a win, in a sense, for women. It was a win, in a sense, for African Americans in my family. So when I actually walked through the door as a bona fide member, it was like all these other women were walking with me, and my whole family was going with me. And, you know, it was just, it's just amazing. And I am so appreciative of that membership. But it's all due to the fact of all the sacrifices that my family had to make. To be a part of something that's real history, in the fact that, you know, it was your family or your parents and your brother that made that history, yeah. And that I'm the one that really gets a chance to benefit so much from it.
On the face of it, golf has come a long way to ridding itself of the explicit barriers towards minorities and women. But how many implicit barriers remain? Let's say you manage to play the sport as a youngster and perhaps go to college on a scholarship. You're good enough, so you then look to make it a career and turn professional. How difficult is that? For Anya Alvarez, it proved very tough.
For me personally, it was a struggle just to find sponsors. And that was one main reason that I decided to stop playing, was because I just was exhausted of having to ask people for money. And I had played decent. I'd finished 3rd at a European Tour event at the beginning of the year. I had made the cut in the US Open. So I felt like I had proved myself as a player in many regards, where I was hoping someone would take a chance on me, and I was barely just covering my expenses. It's several $1,000s a year just for entry fees. Then you're looking at paying your caddy $1,500 to $2,000 a week. Then you're looking at flights, rental cars, hotels if you can't find host housing. It can range from $50,000 to $75,000 a year, and just the expenses itself. And that put just so much stress on me, and it took away the joy of playing, because I was constantly worrying about, well, how am I going to pay for my next tournament? If I don't play well, how am I going to pay rent? How am I going to pay just to live outside of my golf expenses? And I just decided, for my mental health and well-being, that it was better to step away from it rather than put myself into debt, as I know other girls have done.
In 2016, 15 female golfers earned over $1 million in prize money on the LPGA Tour. 110 male golfers crossed that mark on the PGA Tour. The biggest chance of earnings comes in the majors. Combined, they offer $17.8 million in prize money, with the US Women's Open offering the largest amount. This year, it has increased to $5 million in total and is one of the most important events of the year.
80 years after Helen Webb Harris founded the first black women's golf club in the USA, the oldest major for women's, the US Open, is being criticised for being held here. We're at Trump National in Bedminster, New Jersey, owned by Donald Trump. Now, there have been calls to have the major moved or boycotted because of his derogatory comments towards women and minorities.
I know just from talking with people within the USGA that they didn't want it there, and it was a really tough decision. It was, there was a lot of backlash against them, and there still is, and understandably so, because a lot of people are justifiably upset that it's being held there.
The fact that they say that they can have this event at a Trump course because, one, they're apolitical, but two, Trump is not technically violating the rules that they have established about eligibility for holding tournaments, and that is that the course does not have discriminatory policies or practices against minorities and women. And I maintain that what Trump has done and said violates the spirit of the rule.
In response, the US Golf Association told us that the word open carries important meaning, especially for those from around the world who qualified to compete. We owe it to all the players to focus our efforts on conducting the ultimate championship, befitting their shot making, course management and endurance skills. The association also wanted to pay tribute to Renee Powell, a pioneer, they say, who forged new paths for diversity and inclusion in our sport, a story important to us.
You know, it's unfortunate because when you look at women's sports in general, controversy seems to be the driving factor of when coverage is given. And this is going to be something that is going to take away from just focusing on the play of the players that week, because it's going to be a huge part of the discussion that it's Donald Trump's course and what that means, that it was held at his golf course. And it's becoming into a very political issue that I know a lot of players wish it wouldn't have become.
If you're struggling to keep your tour card at that point, and you're in, you're in the open, and you're like, hey, I am like almost dead last on the money list, you gotta do what you gotta do, you gotta eat. Like, I'm just, the simplest way to say is, you just have to look out for yourself and at that moment to make sure that you're, at least still you're still gonna be able to live your dream.
So the battles for some continue. But now there's a generation enabled and inspired by Helen Webb Harris and the Wake Robin ladies, by Bill and Renee Powell, by their vision and their determination to open up the world of golf.
I didn't have somebody to be inspired by that looked just like me. All I watched was Tiger. So I feel like that's great for young kids now, that they have some girls to look up to that are still young, and later down the road, maybe 30 years or so from now, they'll be following in our footsteps.
Our own governing bodies don't tell stories, and in fact they suppress a lot of history. Stories of people overcoming, stepping up, doing what's right. Making sure these kind of important stories about golf and about the evolution of golf need to be told.
That's it. Till we get the numbers up within the organizations that govern golf, I don't think it's going to change dramatically, because I think that a lot of the things, so much starts from the top.
Just look at the board of directors for all the golf organizations, and they're mostly old white men. We need to be in those positions to actually advocate for change, but they're not asking us to be on the board, they're asking their buddies to be on the board with them. And so as a result, not much changes.
I truly feel that everybody should play golf. I think it's, it's such an incredible sport, and I know what I've gained from it.
We want the world to know what we are capable of and not be denied the God-given rights that we all have.
For more from Women's Season of Sport on the BBC, go to bbc.com/sport.